What is going on in America? Censorship. Censorship is often regarded as the worst act the federal government could do, directly violating the First Amendment of the right to freedom of speech and expression. In recent years, these issues have been regarded more urgently, especially in media and social media, with people claiming platforms are purposefully censoring political criticism and even threatening punishment in certain scenarios. Many see this as a direct violation of the First Constitutional Amendment, the right to free speech in the press, raising concerns of federal overreach and the erasure of civil liberties. Despite this, debates over free speech and policies that infringe upon it aren't new. They could even be seen throughout American history. In this video, we will compare and contrast two key moments in American history when the government passed down laws censoring critics: the Sedition Act of 1798 and the Sedition Act of 1918. Although similar in name and policy, it's important to recognize the extreme difference in public response. The Sedition Act of 1798 was passed alongside the Alien Enemies Act under John Adams. This act banned people from printing, uttering, or publishing any false, scandalous, and malicious writing about the government, with fines up to $2,000 or 2 years of imprisonment if violated. This was passed to prevent and protect the federal government from criticism, especially against the Democratic Republicans over the French War. Since this was during the earlier years of America, Americans greatly valued access to natural rights, rights that people believed could not be taken away by the government. Seeing that the act infringed on said natural rights, the act sparked public outrage, as not only did it target a large political party, it also went against the strictly viewed Constitution. Prominent figures such as James Madison and Thomas Jefferson stepped up, drafting the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions condemning the act. Madison points out that elections in the future won't be equal, as people won't have fair, adequate access to the full story due to media censorship. What will be the situation of the people? Not free, because they will be compelled to make their election between competitors whose pretensions they are not permitted by act equally to examine, to discuss, and to ascertain. However, despite the large wave of criticism this act received, it was never repealed or deemed unconstitutional. It was instead left to expire when Thomas Jefferson came to office as the third president, with Jefferson pardoning most people persecuted under the acts. Now flash forward to the early 20th century, where the federal government has grown in power and the sticking to the Constitution wasn't nearly as important to Americans compared to its earlier years. America had just entered the war against Germany and the other Central Powers in the First World War. Determined to mobilize both an efficient military and home front, Woodrow Wilson's administration implemented two things: the Espionage and Sedition Acts. The Sedition Act of 1918 was an extension of the Espionage Act, banning people from obscuring war efforts and showing any disloyalty to the government country through false reports or statements during a time of war. People who violate the acts could face an upwards to 20 years imprisonment and up to a $10,000 fine. Despite the similar circumstances and even harsher punishments, these acts didn't face as much public criticism or backlash compared to the first. It was even deemed as constitutional according to the Supreme Court. Furthermore, many supported the acts at first, viewing them as a protector of national security rather than a violation of civil liberties. Luckily, it was eventually repealed by Congress in 1920, which saw it as a violation of civil liberties after wartime fear ended. Now, why was this the case? In the 1900s, people were a lot more lenient in the scope of federal power, especially during a time of instability. This could be seen in later years during the Great Depression, with Roosevelt's New Deal programs. Due to just entering the First World War, wartime fear lingered on the home front. Therefore, instead of seeing the act as violating rights, people saw it as a protective measure to maintain stable national security and morale. Additionally, the act targeted groups that the public generally looked down upon and feared, including socialists and anti-war activists. This creates a more nationally unified country fighting against a common enemy, rather than fighting amongst themselves, which can be seen back in the initial Sedition Act with the Federalist Party against the Democratic Republicans. Under these conditions, there was less public backlash initially, as people saw it as justified for the government to implement those policies compared to the first Sedition Act. where people saw it as less justified and more of a selfish government gain than for the greater good. As history shows, public opinion is directly affected by the present status of the political climate, national unity, and perceived threats to the nation. While the Sedition Act of 1798 set off a large wave of criticism from the public and prominent figures due to being seen as an attack on civil liberties by the federal government, the 1918 Act had a more mellow response at first due to wartime fear and a stronger sense of nationalism. Keeping this in mind, let's take a look at the current situation again. What is going on regarding media censorship, and why are people unhappy with it? Similar to the situation in 1798, the country fights within, between the two major political parties, instead of a common enemy. The divided nation intensifies concerns of media censorship, especially if it goes against a party's political ideals and opinions, fearing that censorship would only serve another party's political agenda rather than serving the common good of the nation. Anyway, please like, follow, and share if you want more content like this in the future. Hope you have a wonderful day. Goodbye.